everyone and welcome to another episode of Unreal Engine 5 tutorials that were voted for by my patrons and YouTube members. And they voted for how to create animation transitions. And what we mean by this is when you go up to say a chair and transition over to the chair to sit down on it and then get back up again. So I'm going to go through that process of how you can do and achieve this using Unreal Engine 5. And what we're about to go through is just one way of accomplishing this effect. So let's get started. So before we actually tackle any sort of project like this, we first of all break down what are the things we need to accomplish, what are the challenges we're going to overcome. So the first challenge we've got is our understanding of how characters are made in games. Now characters are typically made of capsule components. These are capsules that you're moving around the whole entire scene. These are invisible, so what we do is we put a mesh inside of them to make it look like there's a character running around. So what we're actually seeing here is not actually the mesh running around, but it's the capsule sliding around itself. And the mesh inside is just simulating what it should look like. So to achieve something like sitting down in a chair, for example, the mesh has to basically be overlapping the chair. But we can't move the mesh into the chair without the, with the capsule collision. We have to leave the capsule collision behind. So we have to detach them from each other and get them to animate separately. All whilst having this chair asset that makes it super easy for us as a designer to go ahead and make many different types of chair assets or different assets that require animations to allow us to easily and quickly iterate our own games. So let's get started on creating the chair asset itself. So I brought in character from the marketplace here and some animations I've got. We've got a sit down animation and we've got a stand up animation. Okay. And I've got that retargeted to a skeleton and mesh of a different character from the marketplace. So first of all, I'm going to create the chair by making a blueprint class and choose an actor. And we'll just call it chair. And this chair is going to comprise of a mesh, first of all, for the chair. So just do in here and do static mesh. And we're looking for the chair asset, which comes with our starter kit. The next thing we need to know is basically a radius around the chair to indicate to the player, hey, we can actually walk into this thing and sit in it. So what we need to do is create a sphere collision. Sphere collision. And this is going to be on the chair itself, and we're just going to make it big enough for the character to walk into that area. I'm just going to put it just in front of the chair, so you can't have to walk around the front. We can't do it from the behind. That makes it a bit easier for our AI to take control later on, and that'll do. The next thing we need to do is add in a animation. Now the reason why I'm adding an animation into here is because I want to preview what the character is going to be doing when they're in here. It makes it a lot easier to reposition and get the correct rotations and locations of those animations. So I'm going to add a skeletal mesh, and we'll do preview animation, we'll call it. And on the right hand side, we're going to choose the mannequin option we have, and I think it's this one. And I'm going to first of all position it roughly where I want it to be and turn it around. And then I want to go up to its animation mode and change it from use animation blueprint to use animation asset. And then add into play, I'm going to click on here and I'll choose my sit down animation. So now I can reposition this animation to get the exact position I need for my mesh. So later on, we're going to refer to this mesh asset and get the correct location and positioning of our character. Okay, so that's that bit. The next thing we need to do is be able to tell where the capsule is going to be. So the capsule needs to know where to go when the mesh is doing this job. So we need to go and do add capsule collision. When you add a new capsule collision in there, they're usually going to be quite small. So we want to make sure it's the same size that we need as for our character. So let's just go find our character. And on the viewport, the capsule collision here is 90 by 35. So I'm going to change that to 90, 35. I'm just going to reposition it to where I want the character to end up walking to. It can't overlap the chair. That's the main thing. We can't do that. But we can put anything near it like so. Okay. There we go. Going to hit compile there, and we're good. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, sorry, we have to turn mesh to not be looping. So let's make that not looping. There you go. And there we have it. Okay, so next thing we need to do is know when we've overlapped this thing. We're going to go to the event graph and go to actor begin overlap, and we're going to check if the other actor is equal to the player character. Now the simplest way of doing that is using an equal sign and getting the player character. If it's the same one then as the other actor, then it will give us a true result. And that's when we can initiate the sit down. Now to accomplish all of this, I'm going to make a function on my player character to actually handle this themselves. That way I can make it a lot easier and quicker later on to actually make this thing animate. So I'm going to go to my third person character here, and I'm going to go into function, actually not functions, event graph. And on the event graph, we're going to make a custom event. And this event here we're going to do is trigger animation. Okay, so this is the event we're going to call. Now this trigger animation here, we need to have a few inputs on it. The first thing we need to know is what is the animation we want to play. So I'm going to do animation. And that is going to be a skinned mesh component. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add another input. And this is going to be a location, which is going to be a vector. And we're then going to have a rotation as well, which is going to be a rotator. So the principle behind this is that when the character walks into the chair, the character's AI is going to take over, move it into the correct position, and then play the animation. So to get AI to take over and take control of our character here, we need to first of all create our own player controller. So we're going to go into our content drawer here, and we're going to create a blueprint class player controller, and of course one custom player controller. And in there, we need to just turn off auto manage active camera. Otherwise what will happen is when we unpossess our character and give the AI control, our camera will also detach. So we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to turn that off. Okay, so to get our character to be interacting with this chair, we're going to use an interface to help do this. So we're going to create our new interface in our drawer here. Blueprints, blueprint interface. And we'll call this one the animation interface. Interfaces allow us to run functions on actors that are not necessarily related to each other, but can sort of like vaguely go to them and say like, hey, play this function if you have it. Okay. It's always better to have a direct reference if you can, but this saves us trying to tell which actor we want to do the sit down. We'll just tell it to run this function if it has one, because enemies may do different things, or other NPCs may do different things too. So on this animation interface, we're going to open this up, and it asks us to name a first function for this, and we call this one trigger animation. We're then going to go down to inputs, and we're going to add two inputs here. The first one we're going to add here is the animation itself, and that is going to be a skeletal mesh component. So just click on here and search for skeletal mesh component. If you can spell it correctly, mesh component. We also want a location that we want the player to go to. So we're going to just call this one location. And that's going to be a vector type. Hit compile. And we're good to go. We use that interface on our character. So go to class settings. On the right hand side, you'll see interfaces. We click on add. You're going to search for the animation interface. And there you go. And if it's worked, you should see on the left hand side interfaces, and the trigger animation has appeared. Now we can right click on this and implement this event. So when we call this event, we first of all want our character to be unpossessed, and then be repossessed by some AI, and then move into the correct position. So first of all, we're going to get the player controller. And we're going to do unpossess. And we're then going to right click and do spawn default controller. And what this function does, it will spawn the default AI controller and process it straight away. So now we can plug in something like AI move 2 and it will know what to do. So we can do AI move 2. The pawn will be self. And the destination is going to be our location we've provided in our trigger animation. Okay. That'll do for now. We'll come back to this in a minute when we add the rest of it. But I want to see if we can get this bit showing that it's working. So let's go now to our chair. And if this has been true, there's had to be an overlap. We're going to take the get player character, drag from here, and do trigger animation message. This will be our interface call. So in there, we're going to plug in the animation, which is going to be our skeletal mesh here. Drag that in and plug that into animation. And the location is going to be the get world location of the capsule. So that's where we want our capsule for the player to end up as well. Now, what we're going to do next is we need to put in our nav mesh for our AI to use. So let's just search for our nav mesh. Bounds volume, drag this in, and we're going to cover the level with it. Okay. We're next going to bring in our chair. So let's drag in our chair. Like so. And there we go. Now here's an issue with the chair. The chair is blocking navigation meshes, meaning that it may or may not be able to reach it because this chair's cutting out the nav mesh. An easy fix for that, we just go into the chair itself, click on the static mesh, and we tell this thing not to affect navigation. So search for nav, and you'll see it as that, and we just tick that. Now you can see the nav mesh goes through it just fine. Okay, so let's put our chair there and place that in the scene, like so. Now we want this skeletal mesh, this mannequin here, to be invisible in the actual game. This is just for us as a developer to see where we've placed animations. So I'm going to go into that chair and go to the mannequin and tell it to be hidden in game. Part of that, and that is it. So if I push play now, that chair has no mannequin on it. Now because I unticked that thing in that custom player controller, our animation camera hasn't been set up properly. So we just need to go to our custom player controller. Where to put it in here? Yep. And go to event graph. And on here, we're going to go to functions, override, and do on possess. And when we do on possess, we're going to tell the possess pawn to be the target camera. Okay, so we're going to do target, view, set view target with blend. That's the one we want. Plug that into there. The new view target will be our possess pawn, and we'll leave it at 0. So it should take control of the character like normal. So if I walk into the area of the chair, our character should have no control now, and will continue moving. There you go. Excellent. So there is our character control, taking control and moving to location. Now you see the character controller, the camera has detached itself from the player. So when we are doing this, we have to watch out because what's happening is our view target with blend is still being played off here. What I want to do is do this again, but for unpossess. So exact same thing. We'll keep the camera with the unpossessed pawn. Now if I push play, it will do that. Okay. Alternatively, you could also have a camera on the chair itself, so you can control that camera if you like. Totally up to you. Either way, how you approach that problem is totally up to you. And the main thing that we get to that point now is we have to tell it to play the animation. So let's go to our player character onto this trigger animation. And on success, we need to first of all tell our mesh to get into the correct location and rotation as the animation is. So we're going to drag out our mesh component from our character and do move component to. And when the move to has been successful, we're going to tell this to start moving. And we're going to tell the target relative location and target rotation to come from our animation here. So we're going to drag that out, add a little reroute node in. And from there, we're going to get location and get world location. And we also want to get the world rotation. Now, the issue we have here, these are world location rotations, and we need it to be a relative location and rotation relative to our mesh here. So to do that, we're going to use our transform nodes. We're going to get the actor transform. And then from there, we're going to do, I believe it's inverse transform. Yeah. And that transforms the coordinate from world space to local space. I'm going to put that in there. And again, we're going to drag from there and do inverse transform rotation. Plug that in there, and then plug this in here. And so that should turn our character into the correct location. And you can tweak this over time value here to make it look a bit more smooth if you need to. It depends on your setup of what you've done for your different objects. But we'll put in a value of 0.5 for now. But again, you can tweak this to whatever you're liking. So what that's going to do is going to move the mesh away from its current position. And when that's completed, we need it to tell it to play this animation. I'm going to again drag this animation out here. Do a reroute node. And then from our mesh component, we're going to set animation mode to use animation asset. And the reason why we have to do that is because currently our mesh is using the animation blueprint, and we need it to stop doing that and just to play a single animation. So we do this, and then we tell our mesh here to play animation, like so. And the animation to play is going to come from our skeletal mesh component on the animation. So let's drag our animation pin here, type in animation. And if you scroll down, you should see the option to get animation data. You're going to get this and then split it open. When you do this, you're going to see the data anim to play. So let's drag that out and put that into there. Now you don't want it to loop, so that's fine. We're just going to put that in there and be done with it. Okay, hit compile and save this. So let's take a look at what this looks like now. There you go. We've got a character getting into position and moving in as they should do. Excellent. I like it a lot. So next thing we need to do is make it resume back to the player when we stand up. So at the moment, controls will do nothing because we're not processing it or anything like that. So we need to just make it so that when we push a button, we want to reprocess it and off we go. Now, because we're not processing it, that button push has to happen on the player controller itself. So let's go back to the player controller. And in here, we're going to use, let's say, move forwards as the event. But you don't want this to consume input. So turn off consume input. Now we need to know which actor we have unpossessed and which one is now sitting down. Okay. So when we unpossess the character here, this pawn here, I need to store reference to this unpossessed pawn. So let's drag this out of here and promote that to a variable. And I can leave it as unpossessed pawn, that'd be fine. And just put that in there. So now I have reference to who I want to gain control of again. So up here, we're going to do our unpossessed pawn out here. And we're going to simply tell it to possess this. Right. So let's take a look at what difference that makes. So at the moment, what's happened is my character, because I was holding down the button anyway, has triggered that possession and possession. So what I need to do is tell it to not do it straight away, but wait for a certain amount of time. So I'm going to go back to my content browser, go over to my controller, And on our unpossessed here, this unpossessed pawn, I want to take that away. Ooh, onto the other side here. And put a delay on this when we let go of this. Okay, so I'm going to put a delay. And we'll delay for 2 seconds. Something like that. We'll use a timer, whatever you like. Okay, so that becomes unpossessed pawn, which means up here, we want to make sure that this is actually set to something before we tell it to possess. So just right click on this and convert the validated get. And put that in there. And we only want to do this when the controller has nothing to being possessed right now. So we're going to do possessed. Get get controlled, sorry, that's what I'm looking for. Controlled pawn. There we go. Get controlled pawn, and we're going to say if that's not valid, do this check. It's not valid. Do this check. Okay, so let's try that again. Go into here. Sit down. And then I push W key again, and I can move around again. Okay. Obviously, big issue at the moment is my character mesh is not animating because the animation mode is still broken, and also the offset is still there too. So we need to turn that off as well. So before we enable input back onto that character, we need to tell this character to sort its life out and get back onto track. So let's go back to the controller here and change what happens with this possession. So on that unpossessed pawn, we need to tell it to resume our control. Now at the moment, we've just used a trigger animation. Well, I want to do basically the opposite of this one as also an animation interface. So let's go to animation interface, add a new function. And this is going to be clear animation. I'll call this one. And going to hit compile there. Now we shouldn't need any inputs for this, but let's go on and try it out. And let's put in our clear animation event. So when we tell our character here to clear their animation, what we'll be doing is we're going to tell them to stand up and to resume control. Now the standing up animation is going to change based upon what thing we're currently sitting on. So on our chair here, we need to keep track of what that animation needs to be. So on here as well, we're going to have on the variables the revert animation. And that'll be an animation sequence. Anim sequence. There we go. And I'm just going to set that to a that, and set that to our stand up. Find it. There. Okay. So we've got that reference there. That's good. What we need. Now for the preview animation going through into the trigger animation, on the player side of things, when we get this trigger animation, we want to store this as a variable. So let's drag that out and do promote to variable and do current animation. Like so. Okay. Next, we're going to go to a clear animation here and we get the current animation out. Now, with the current animation, because this is a reference to this chair actor already, it has a sorry, not reference to the chair actor. It's a reference to a mesh that's on the chair actor, meaning that if I drag this from here and get owner, I think it is. Just double check that. Yep, get owner. This will get us the actor that owns this mesh. So I need now to be able to get this revert animation from our owner. And for that, we can use our animation interface. So I'm going to go to add here. And going to do get revert. And that's going to output the animation sequence. And revert anim. Compile. Now go back to the chair. And we're going to go to class settings and add this interface to it. So animation interface. And on our interfaces here, we can see get revert. We can right click on this and convert, open graph. There we are. And just plug in the revert animation into there. So now on the third person character, from this get owner, I can call that revert to get the revert animation. Okay, so let's tell our mesh now to play this revert animation. So play anim. And we'll plug that into there. And we'll plug this into here. We then need to tell it to move back to its 0, 0 position. So I'm going to use this move component 2, the exact same thing. I'm going to copy this back here. And do move. And on here, I'm going to leave target relative location and target relative rotation at 0, 0, essentially. But double check it. If you go to the mesh, you want it to be these values here. So I want it to actually be -90 in the Z and 270 in rotation in the Z. So just put that in here. -90 and 270. And that will make him stand back up into that position. We then want to tell our character to be possessed by this thing. So we're going to go get player controller. And we're going to do possess. And do self. And that's it. So now what I want to do is I want to call this clear animation from my controller. Put the controller here. So rather than possessing it, we're going to take this pawn and do clear animation. Oh, and there's one more thing I forgot to do. I'm going to go back to the third person character. And after we've completed the move 2 and we've possessed the character, in fact, once we've possessed the character, we're going to take the mesh here and we're going to do set animation mode. If I can find it. Back to use animation blueprint. And we're going to do set anim instance class to our animation blueprint that we have on here, which is by default third person anim BP. I'll just search for third person anim BP. Compile. So let's try this out now. So catch this down. Oh, something's gone wrong there. Okay, so the issue we saw there is because we're using the move forwards. So a little error there. I'll go to here. So move forward here is an input access event, meaning it's always firing. So immediately once we've sat down, it's going to call this again and it's going to be fine. So rather than use this, we're actually going to use a input for this. So for now, I'm going to do a left click, or left mouse button, rather, what it's called. So I have to actually click the button to actually do this. And it could be like a gamepad controller, input, whatever. Okay. That'll go into there and we'll hit play now and try this out instead. I click stand up and there we go. Now I can run off again. Come back in. And click and off I go. Okay, so the issue we saw there where it wasn't coming out of the correct rotation is because the capsule still is facing the wrong way. So we need to rotate the character to be facing the correct way as the animation. So then when we come out of it, it's more natural looking. So let's go into the third person character and add one little thing after the AI move 2 on the trigger animation path. And on success here, we're going to do set actor rotation. And the rotation of this actor is going to come from the animation itself. So we're going to drag out our current animation variable. And from there, we're going to get owner. You'll see the get owner option there. And then from that, we can then do the forward vector, the actor forward vector. And then finally, from that, we can get the rotation by doing make rot from X. And that'll give us the correct rotation for our new actor rotation. Let's compile that. And let's go into here now. Okay, so there we're facing the right way. However, the camera's being pushed back by the chair. So we're just going to tell that chair to ignore the camera. So we're going to go into our character again. Our camera boom here is using the camera probe channel. So I'm going to go to my chair here and tell the mesh to ignore that channel. So go to collision, go to collision presets, and do custom. And on camera here, we're going to do overlap. So now my camera should allow me to go through the chair. And I click left click to go up, and I can go up again. There we go. And there we have it. We've now got a system to handle animation transitions from the player's normal playtime over to a certain pose, such as sitting. If you like this video and want to see more of my content early, head over to patreon.com/Ryan Laley. Your donation of $1 a month will get you access to all my videos early before anyone else. I want to say a massive thank you to all my patrons and YouTube members who voted for this video and continue to support me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye everyone.